Kingdom Hearts 3 is the most divisive game in the entire Kingdom Hearts series. It is really freaking stupid that this is an accurate statement. As a general warning, this video will contain major spoilers for Kingdom Hearts 3. Also, as a disclaimer, while Nerd Odyssey is technically a channel I share with my friend Ryan, the views expressed in this video are solely my own. So think of this less as a Nerd Odyssey video and more as a Skylar talks about his thoughts video. So Kingdom Hearts 3 has been out for a few weeks now, and the reception has ranged from extremely positive to extremely negative, and just about everything in between. It's at a point where I can no longer go on social media and see anything related to Kingdom Hearts without seeing a million comments about people trying to convince people who did like the game that they are somehow objectively wrong. In fact, the premise of Kingdom Hearts 3 being objectively bad or objectively worse is something that I have seen a lot of on the internet, and it has absolutely infuriated me every time I see it. I really wish that people would stop misusing that word as a way to try to promote their personal opinion as if it is a fact. It's not. Just Right did a fantastic video called Can You Judge Art Objectively? And it is something that I recommend you guys check out when you get the time. But to sum up the concept of objectively bad, it doesn't exist. There is no such thing as objectively bad art. Objective, by definition, is merely the literal and factual events, while subjective is opinion. So let's give an example. Kingdom Hearts 3 has fewer worlds than Kingdom Hearts 2 is objective. That's a fact. That's measurable. There are definitely a lot more worlds in Kingdom Hearts 2 than there are in Kingdom Hearts 3. But saying Kingdom Hearts 3 is worse than Kingdom Hearts 2 because it has less worlds is not objective. That is subjective. This might seem simple, but it's important to make this distinction because I've seen so many people try to play off their viewpoints about a game or a movie as if their criticisms are only based on objective fact, with no personal bias or opinion, when that is simply not true at all. Now, one of the main reasons that I have to start this video off by bringing up this point is because there seems to be this bizarre mindset within a good portion of the internet that you are not allowed to question or disagree with criticisms that other people make. Otherwise, that just means that you can't take criticism, and you should never try to argue with someone's criticism because criticism can only be a good thing. The statement that criticism can only be a good thing, while I think it is well intended, I don't think that there's any truth to that because it implies that subjective opinions can be objective criticisms, and they can't be. Even if an opinion is really popular and held by the majority, it is still just an opinion and not an objective fact. Everyone can have an opinion and critique a product, but that does not mean that someone's critique itself cannot be questioned, disagreed upon, or debated. It doesn't make someone a blind fanboy who's in denial just because they completely disagree with your reasonings for disliking a product, and it's really condescending and totally kills discussion when you hold that kind of viewpoint. And this statement is going to sound really weird to a lot of you, but not all criticism deserves to be respected equally and agreed upon. Sometimes you see people give criticism on art that showcase that these people completely miss the point of the story, or they may even offer suggestions for improvement that are unrealistic. Or worse, suggestions that would arguably only make the product worse. And oftentimes there's criticism that serves as mere nitpicks, but are exaggerated as being bigger deals than they are. I feel like this is really what the majority of Kingdom Hearts 3's complaints are just a bunch of nitpicks that are really exaggerated. Now, when I say that not all criticism deserves to be respected equally, I'm of course only referring to the criticism itself and not necessarily the person holding them. I think it is totally possible to respect someone as a person while completely and utterly disagreeing with their opinion. I definitely need to say this because there are people that I'm friends with online who might see this video and potentially get offended. Just know ahead of time that my intention is not to offend, but I'm also not going to shy away from anything less than my completely honest thoughts on this subject. So now, with the longest introduction in the history of introductions out of the way, oh wait, that's Kingdom Hearts 2's prologue. Let's dive in and talk about specifics. Kingdom Hearts 3 serves as a good example as to why Valve will never release Half-Life 3. People don't know how to control their own hype and expectations, so the game, upon release, has no chance to even remotely live up to the hype. I think the biggest problem that is plaguing the Kingdom Hearts fanbase right now is that people are not judging Kingdom Hearts 3 for what it is, but are instead judging it based upon this imaginary criteria that they've built up in their head over the past decade of waiting for this game. The most common criticisms I see about the game have nothing to do with the game itself, but are instead about how the game does not include specific things they may have wanted in the game. Many examples consist of many of the areas in Twilight Town that were in Kingdom Hearts 2 are unavailable to explore in Kingdom Hearts 3. You're also not able to visit Radiant Garden, Final Fantasy is almost non-existent, there's no Olympus Coliseum tournament. These are just a few examples. And don't get me wrong, I understand being disappointed by these things not being included in the game. Personally, I myself was disappointed in the lack of a Coliseum. However, this way of thinking is not judging the game for what it is, it's judging it based on the criteria of this imaginary game that you've had in your head that did have those features. And there's a difference between being mildly disappointed that these things aren't in the game and acting like these are objective reasons for why the game is bad. It's like this. Square Enix is like a neighbor that decided to host an ice cream social for the neighborhood, and so you and your family gather around together. Well, you have a child that really built up his expectations because he heard ice cream social and he was imagining thousands of ice cream flavors. He was imagining cherries, bananas on the side, chocolate syrup, and even brownies that you could put next to him. And then you arrive at the ice cream social and you get vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, and maybe even peanut butter ice cream. You get a decent variety of ice cream, and then the child complains and says it's terrible because it didn't have the cherry or the bananas or the brownies. You know what you do to a child in that situation if he was whining and complaining about that? You tell him to shut up and deal with it. That child was not judging the ice cream social for what it was, he was judging it based upon his own self-imposed expectations. And that's not fair. And just because prior Kingdom Hearts games had you go to certain worlds or do certain things, does not mean that they needed to be back in Kingdom Hearts 3 in order for it to be a good game. Kingdom Hearts 3 is not the first game in the series to not have an arena. It's not the first game in which Radiant Garden is represented only by cutscenes, and it's certainly not the first game in which Final Fantasy has taken a back seat. In fact, Final Fantasy cameos in general have been kind of irrelevant since Kingdom Hearts 2, if we're going to be completely honest with ourselves. Again, I can understand being disappointed that they aren't here, but I don't think it's really fair criticism to say that the game loses a mark just because this specific fan service thing you wanted didn't happen. I think it's important to distinguish between wants and needs and really ask yourself, does Kingdom Hearts 3 really need this? Or is it just, I really want this? I think a really good example of this is when everyone was freaking out because the small area outside of Yensid's tower is not playable in Kingdom Hearts 3, but there's one single trailer where you see Sora, Dawn, and Goofy fighting Heartless outside of this. And lots of people are crying, cut content, cut content! And whenever I hear people complaining about the inability to explore Yensid's tower, I always have to ask, what purpose would that have even served? And the honest answer is, nothing. The only purpose for going to Yensid's tower is just to hear exposition from Yensid. That's literally it. In what way would making Yensid's tower playable make this better or more efficient? It wouldn't. In fact, I personally believe that this area was cut because it actually worsened the pacing of the game. I mean, think about it. How would the game play out if Yensid's tower was a playable area? Well, you finish completing Olympus. Then, you enter a loading screen. And now you're at the Gummy Ship map. So you can go and you select to go to Yensid's tower. Now, assuming that you can just teleport there instantly instead of doing a Gummy Ship mission, you'd still have to wait for a loading screen. Then, you land outside the tower exterior. Then, you walk through the door. And guess what? Another loading screen. After the loading screen, now we have a 2 to 6 minute cutscene that plays. Now that the cutscene is over, it's time to go to a save point and leave the world. Once you leave the world, guess what? Another loading screen. And now we're back in the Gummy Ship menu. So you see how that's a lot of unnecessary time for a world in which nothing really happens? It's much more efficient to just load up a single cutscene and take the player to where they need to go after that. In fact, it's a major step up from Kingdom Hearts 2, which had the constant problem where you would enter an area, you would walk around for 2 seconds, and then a cutscene would trigger. It's way more efficient to just trigger the cutscene right away. And it's the same thing with Radiant Garden. There isn't really anything of consequence that happens there, so why make it playable? The only purpose it would serve is fan service and tradition, which I don't really think are enough reasons to justify it if the story does not naturally call for it. Would I have liked to see Final Fantasy characters beyond Moogles and Noctis, I mean Yozora? Sure. I also would have liked to explore Destiny Islands, and I thought thematically it would have worked as a world for the final battle to take place in. I also would have liked to go to worlds that went through the stories of Aladdin 3, The King of Thieves, Atlantis the Lost Empire, and Treasure Planet. However, it is not a flaw with the game itself just because it didn't do those things that I would have liked to see. Those are just things I had in my head that I theorized and pondered about and thought, oh, that would be cool if they did this. But the absence of those things does not make the game itself worse. And this goes beyond worlds and cameos, but even the story. It's one of the reasons why I'm not that big of a fan of theory culture in recent years. I might theorize about various different things from time to time, but I'm very careful to never get married to my own ideas. After all, if a story played out exactly as how I guessed it would, that would be pretty boring. Some of my favorite stories out there are ones that manage to catch me by surprise and even defy popular fan theories. Unfortunately, I seem to be in the minority in this, because when every Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer was releasing, it seemed that all anybody ever wanted to do was overanalyze and over-theorize about every single one. I even poked fun at this back in one of my older videos on Nerd Odyssey. Back when the popular theory was that the cloaked person in San Francisco was Shion, because people stared at 10 frames of a clip and compared it to multiple different screenshots from prior Kingdom Hearts games. I don't want to say it's necessarily a bad thing to theorize and analyze trailers if that's what you're into, but I think you greatly run into the risk of misleading yourself into thinking that the story is deeper than it really is. Speaking of San Francisco, it's actually a really good example of this point. When the second Big Hero 6 trailer came out, the popular theory was that the nanobots in the game were actually data bugs from Recoded, and that the Riku in there was actually Data Riku. And not to sound too smug, but I seem to have been the only person who called it that people were overanalyzing everything, and that the blocks were just nanobots, and that the Riku there was not Jiminy Cricket's frickin' journal. But because people were so convinced of this and married to this idea, they found themselves disappointed in that world story because it wasn't as deep as they thought. And if you're one of those people, then I'm sorry, but you only misled yourself. That's not Square's fault that you chose to overanalyze every single frame and let your imagination completely run wild. And again, I need to reiterate, making theories and analyzing trailers isn't inherently a bad thing. However, you need to accept that the story can go any other direction beyond what you have in your head. Especially since it's Kingdom freaking Hearts. Speaking of which... I always knew that Kingdom Hearts 3 was going to be ridiculed by those who were not in the fanbase already, specifically for the story. It's why, when people freak out over Jim Sterling or Video Game Donkey, I just don't care. I think the criticisms they gave regarding the story make sense from their particular viewpoint, where they were never really fans of the series in the first place and are only playing it because it's one of those infamous waiting over a decade kind of games. The criticism with the story and dialogue that comes from people like them are expected. That doesn't bug me. What does confuse me is when that criticism comes from those who are already fans of the series and believe that Kingdom Hearts 3 somehow has the worst of it. I really want to know what kind of mindset you have going on to think that way. The difference in quality in the dialogue, cinematography, and pacing of the story has massively improved from prior entries, and I think it's really disingenuous to say that it hasn't. This feels especially ironic coming from those in the Kingdom Hearts 2 was the only good Kingdom Hearts game crowd. So, Kingdom Hearts 3's dialogue and cutscenes are bad, but Kingdom Hearts 2's aren't? Like, When was the last time you did a full playthrough of Kingdom Hearts 2 without skipping all the cutscenes? Because just as a reminder, this is what cutscenes were like in Kingdom Hearts 2.
Man, doesn't that tick you off?
Yeah, that's just wrong.
Cypher's gone too far this time.
I mean, it's true that stuff's been stolen around town, and we've got a score to settle with Cypher and everything. So, if he wants to think we did it, I can't really blame him. See, that's not what really bugs me. What really bugs me is that he's going around telling everybody we're the thieves. Now the whole town and their mothers are treating us like the Klepto Club. Have you ever been this ticked off before in your life? 'Cause I haven't. Nuh-uh. Never. Now, what to do? Well...
So you're telling me that that's fine, but that this isn't?
Whoa!
Hey, wow! You guys are all here!
We were here before, but you didn't wait. Oh, Your Majesty!
Hey there, fellas! So, what have you three been up to?
We were visiting. Oh!
And to figure out how to get all of Sora's lost powers back.
But it was a big disappointment.
Oh, what a shame.
I'm sorry, but even if you're a fan who always hated the scenes of every Kingdom Hearts game, it's incredibly disingenuous to say that Kingdom Hearts 3 hasn't improved at all. I mean, obviously I won't say that you're quote-unquote objectively wrong if you think the cutscenes in Kingdom Hearts 2 are better, but I'm really curious as to why you think cutscenes with long awkward pauses and basic cinematography are better than the ones with faster timing, creative camera angles, and custom music. And it even goes beyond just individual cutscenes. I'm just confused in general as to why people think the story of Kingdom Hearts 3 is somehow worse than anything that had come before, except maybe Kingdom Hearts 1 and Chain of Memories. I'm gonna keep doing a lot of comparing between Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts 3, mostly because Kingdom Hearts 2 is the most praised Kingdom Hearts game. It's basically the Super Smash Bros. Melee of the Kingdom Hearts series. It's a good, but extremely overrated entry in which people think that any element that is not like Kingdom Hearts 2 is automatically bad. It's also a good game to compare it to, considering that literally everyone else already compares Kingdom Hearts 3 to Kingdom Hearts 2, but only when it comes to post-game content, which is ridiculous for a number of reasons that I'll get back to later. I've seen a lot of complaints about the pacing of Kingdom Hearts 3's story, and this is probably going to be my most controversial statement in this video, but I think the pacing of Kingdom Hearts 3 is leagues better than the pacing in Kingdom Hearts 2. I still think that it's not the best pacing. The best entry for pacing is the first game, Kingdom Hearts 1. But Kingdom Hearts 3 is far from being the worst in terms of pacing and storytelling. The biggest strength to the storytelling in Kingdom Hearts 3 is that it does not waste the player's time. There is never a sense that what is happening is padding or filler, which is a massive step up from what Kingdom Hearts 2 had. Kingdom Hearts 2 actually has the exact opposite pacing problem that I see people accuse Kingdom Hearts 3 of having. It is way too long for its own good. And it's not like it's long because there's a lot happening, it's long because there's a lot of nothing happening. And it's like this from the very beginning. I know that there are a lot of people out there who like the Roxas prologue, but you have to understand there's a reason why it was criticized as much as it was when Kingdom Hearts 2 first launched back in 2006. It's over 3 hours long, and it could have easily been shortened down to 1 hour. It has some interesting elements, but cutscenes go on for way too long, and there are just some portions of Roxas' story that feel completely pointless. You could have easily removed Day 2 and Day 5, and the game would have been stronger for it. Day 2 starts off with this random scenario of doing a bunch of random jobs to save up money to go to the beach, just for it to ultimately lead nowhere. Day 5 has you going to random areas, talking to NPCs, and examining random things to search for the 7 wonders of Twilight Town, which again, leads absolutely nowhere. These days are filler, and do nothing but pad out the game to increase artificial length. The game never feels like it truly starts until you're 3 hours in and take control of Sora. Now compare that to the opening of Kingdom Hearts 3. It has one single 2-minute cutscene, and then it immediately has you picking up the controller to teach you the basic controls. And they top it off with a mini-boss. Afterwards, it plays a 2-minute cutscene quickly establishing that Sora's main goal is to regain the strength that he had lost so that he can be ready to save the lost Keyblade wielders and fight Xehanort. Then, we immediately get to go right into the action and go to Olympus. People complain that Kingdom Hearts 3's pacing feels way too fast, but I couldn't disagree more. It isn't that Kingdom Hearts 3's pacing is too fast, but it is that prior Kingdom Hearts games like Kingdom Hearts 2 have pacing that was way too slow. And because people are used to how Kingdom Hearts 2 was paced, Kingdom Hearts 3 feels really different. Kingdom Hearts 3 doesn't waste the player's time, it cuts straight to the point. And yes, Kingdom Hearts 3 does have a big barrier of entry for obvious reasons, but assuming that you've played the prior entries in the Kingdom Hearts series, the story of Kingdom Hearts 3 itself is the most straightforward since Kingdom Hearts 1. Let me repeat myself so you don't get confused. Assuming you played the prior Kingdom Hearts games, Kingdom Hearts 3 has the most straightforward story since Kingdom Hearts 1. I've seen the common complaint that Kingdom Hearts 3 doesn't have a mid-break world like Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 does, but I'd argue that Kingdom Hearts 3 doesn't really need it. This is the sort of complaint that I feel is more rooted in its tradition, so it needs to be in here, rather than because it would serve a natural narrative function. Let's go back to Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 and think about this. What was the purpose of revisiting Traverse Town in Kingdom Hearts 1? Well, with Traverse Town, the narrative purpose behind going back there was to learn about what the keyholes are, why they need to be sealed, as well as discovering Riku and finding out that he's in league with the Disney villains. It introduces things that the player did not already know, and clarified things that were once a mystery. What is the narrative purpose of visiting Radiant Garden again in Kingdom Hearts 2? Well, kind of a lot. It's connected deeply with the Disney role of Tron, and so anytime you need to visit Tron is a time that you need to go to visit Radiant Garden. It's also the visit in which you reunite with Mickey and he reveals to you that Ansem was not really Ansem, but was instead Ansem's apprentice named Xehanort, who was a nobody that leads Organization 13. And people pretend that Kingdom Hearts 2 is not to blame for why the story is the way it is. It is in this visit that we also learn that Organization 13's true goal is for Sora to destroy the Heartless and collect those hearts in order to create a version of Kingdom Hearts. So in both cases, the primary reason for those mid-break worlds was to learn something new about the hero's objectives and the villain's motivations. But in Kingdom Hearts 3, a mid-break world isn't really needed because we already know all of that from the start. We know that our enemy is Xehanort. We know that he needs 13 darknesses and 7 lights in order to forge the Keyblade. We know that if Sora fails to gather the 7 lights, that Xehanort will use the 7 princesses of pure light instead. And we also know that learning the power of waking and saving Aqua is going to be the key to saving everyone else. This is all information that we knew right from the beginning of the game, and the only new information given later on isn't enough to justify an entire world visit, especially when a Yenzo is just a phone call away to explain to us how replicas and data are the key to saving everyone. I've heard some suggest that they should have had a mid-world break right after saving Aqua and Ventus, but it's like, for the sake of character motivation, why on earth would everyone procrastinate fighting Xehanort when he and his vessels have been threatening other worlds and princesses if Sora and the others don't hurry up and fight him? I mean, every time that you go to a Disney World, all the organization members are harassing Sora and saying, you better find your 7 Guardians of Light or else we're going to use those princesses, you better hurry up or else there's going to be consequences. I mean, with all this threatening, it only makes sense to me that once you get the 7 Guardians of Light, the immediate course of action is to go to the Keyblade graveyard. I mean, what would be the alternative?
Everyone, we must make haste and defeat Xehanort once and for all.
Yeah, that's cool and all, but I say that we should take some more time to goof off at some Disney Worlds instead.
But if we don't fight him soon, Xehanort will use innocent princesses instead.
He'll be fine. I had this discussion a little while ago with someone who offered this kind of solution, and I gave my exact reasonings as to why I don't think this is a real solution. He then asks, what's your solution to giving Aqua and Ventus more scenes to interact with the characters? And my honest answer was nothing. Because this is something that people seem to forget, is that criticisms aren't universal. They're not fact, they're just opinions. Some of you may have wanted to go to a Disney World with Aqua and Ventus, but I didn't. And I love Aqua and Ventus. Birth by Sleep is my second favorite Kingdom Hearts game. But I also understand that Kingdom Hearts 3 is not their story. It's Sora's story. It always has been. I don't think Aqua and Ventus needed more interactions. I was satisfied with what I had. Any more would not have benefited the narrative. In fact, it arguably would have damaged it and made the pacing far worse. We don't need a bunch of more scenes of Ventus and Aqua going, hey, remember when we were in Olympus? Yeah, those were great times. The game has plenty of that already, and I don't understand the need to have more of that. And this is the reason why in the beginning of the video I explained that I do not agree with the sentiment that criticism can only be a good thing. It's only a good thing if you agree with the criticism, but if Square actually listened to this kind of critique and added a filler story point where Sora, Aqua, and Ventus visit another world, I genuinely think that would have been a detriment to the story. That would have been Kingdom Hearts 2 levels of bad pacing, where you went from the epic climax of one of Radiant Garden's visits to, well, let's go visit Land of Dragons again and see that Mulan is just goofing around. Some of you may have liked that, and that's fine, I guess, but there's a lot of us that didn't and really found this to be padding. And in Kingdom Hearts 3, this definitely would have been padding. If Square Enix actually did what most of you suggested, the pacing of the game would be far worse for it. You can't have the story of the game constantly scaring the player and saying, you better hurry up because a Keyblade War is coming whether you're ready or not, and then simultaneously say, now that we're ready to fight in the Keyblade War, let's go goof off and do other things. Doing so would make the main conflict less interesting and urgent, which damages the narrative overall. Most of the people that I've seen complaining about the pacing seem to be mad that it's fast just because it's fast, but they're never stopping to think about why it's fast or why they chose to make it this fast. The pacing may be faster than Kingdom Hearts 2, but it's because it's the kind of pace this story demands. Kingdom Hearts 3 is a follow-up with a cliffhanger of an ending that ends with Xehanort and his forces are getting ready for a final battle. You need to be ready. That is all that the story of Kingdom Hearts 3 is. The other complaints regarding Kingdom Hearts 3's pacing are at the final act, and I find this complaint really bizarre. Does a lot happen in the final act? Yes, but that's not really a bad thing. Is there a few stuff that happens that is glossed over or not well explained? Yes, but are we really going to pretend this is a brand new thing in Kingdom Hearts and that no other game is guilty of? Kingdom Hearts 2 has all of the major events culminate in the last few hours. Axel tells Sora that Saïx kidnapped Kairi. Axel dies to get Sora to the world that never was. Sora fights with Roxas for some reason. It's still not really clear why this happens. Diz is revealed to be Ansem. Naminé is somehow able to rescue Kairi for some reason that's, again, never really explained in the game. What even was Naminé doing this whole game after helping Roxas? It is revealed that Riku took on Xehanort's form to defeat Roxas. Kairi randomly gets a Keyblade from Riku, and then it's never mentioned again in the rest of the game. You defeat Xigbar, and he hints that he knows far more about Keyblade wielders than you might initially think, which only serves as foreshadowing for future stories. You reunite with Riku. You defeat Luxord. You defeat Saïx. Ansem's machine explodes, which damages the new Kingdom Hearts, and somehow, again with poor explanation, returns Riku to his normal self. Maleficent and Pete decide to fight Heartless in order to take the castle, and then finally you fight Xemnas and his many final boss phases. That is a lot of stuff that gets crammed into 3 hours of game time. Much of which is stuff that is never explained in-game. Sure, there are some things like Kairi's Keyblade that eventually get explained in interviews from Tetsuya Nomura, but if we're just looking at the vacuum of Kingdom Hearts 2 by itself when it first came out, there's a lot of stuff that happens in that game where the player has no choice but to just see what happens and say, it just works. And it never stopped at Kingdom Hearts 2. Birth by Sleep has major climaxes in the last 2 hours of each campaign, all of which contain a lot of, well that just happened moments. Even the first Kingdom Hearts game, which is widely regarded as being the game with the most simple and straightforward story, contains many of these moments. The game never explains whose voice it is that Sora hears. It is never explained why Sora was able to defeat Ansem just by saying, "Kingdom Hearts is light!" It never explains how Kairi even got to the end of the world in the first place. She just kind of shows up. It's never explained why the universe forces Kairi to be sent back to Destiny Islands but not Sora for some reason. And it never explains anything about what Pluto's been up to or how he's even been able to get around. So my question then is, why is it okay that these other games did this and we're just fine with it, but then it's the worst thing ever when Kingdom Hearts 3 also does this kind of thing that literally every other Kingdom Hearts game has always done? I mean, compared to the world that never was, everything that happened in the Keyblade Graveyard is really straightforward so long as you were paying attention. Sure, there is a lot that does happen in the Keyblade Graveyard, but most of it is stuff that we were already sure was going to happen anyway. Oh man, we saved Terra, Roxas, and Xion. I totally didn't see that one coming at all. Oh man. And it's not like their return is really all that out of nowhere. The reason behind Roxas's return was actually explained long before his actual return happened. And once you realize that the power of waking and replicas would be the answer to saving everyone else, then everyone else's return is really straightforward. The only return that is a little fuzzy is Xion, but I don't think it's so out of nowhere as people think. All the pieces are there, they just weren't clearly spelled out like Roxas was. In Toy Box, young Xehanort's mission is experimenting with how hearts can come from even something like a toy or puppet. One of the cutscenes showcases the organization members referring back to Vexen having records of creating the Riku replica and Xion. This is backed up by the 2 secret reports written by Vexen, in which he explains that he has written records of Xion being a hindrance to the organization, and explaining that he is currently playing double agent with Xehanort as he works on new replicas. We also know from Ienzo talking about reviving Roxas that they were able to use Roxas's data found in Ansem's computer to create a partial heart as a basic foundation. In the Caribbean, Vexen is fascinated by Davy Jones, who can seemingly exist and function even when his heart is outside of his own body. In San Francisco, Evil Riku talks about how data can be used to gather emotions and conflict in order to forge and complete a heart. Then, in Land of Departure, we realize that it wasn't until Ventus felt the connection of a friend being in danger that he was able to fully awaken and communicate with Sora. Roxas himself explains that a connection was what was needed for him to be whole again. So with all of these pieces in place, how did Xion return? As of now, this is technically theorizing, but I think the answer can be pretty clearly found within these clues. Vexen had records of Xion proving hindrance to the organization, so he likely used data to forge a partial heart for Xion. At this early stage within her lifetime, she merely follows Xehanort because she is an incomplete vessel who can only be used as a weapon to fight in the Keyblade War. However, the connection of being in close proximity to Sora, Kairi, and Axel allowed her heart to be connected externally, in a similar manner that one might say Davy Jones' heart was. Then, when Roxas speaks Xion's name from within Sora, that is when Xion's heart truly becomes complete and she is fully restored. It is only at this point that we start to see her freak out and we even see her face. At this point, she regained her identity. Similarly to how in 358 Days Over 2, she didn't have a face until she made a connection with Roxas and Axel. It was very much the same thing in this Keyblade Graveyard fight. Now again, this is technically theory territory, and I'm fine if an official explanation does come out and contradict some of what I've said. But my main point is that I don't think Xion's return is completely out of nowhere as some people make it out to be. At least not by Kingdom Hearts standards. It's not perfect, and there's definitely ways they could have explained it better, but I don't think it's impossible to figure out. Again, I think there are things in prior Kingdom Hearts games that were far more confusing upon release. I was able to use information from Kingdom Hearts 3's story and reach a conclusion that makes sense, again in Kingdom Hearts standards. Is it a flaw to not have it explained more clearly? Sure. Is this a flaw that is unique to Kingdom Hearts 3? Absolutely freaking not, and I think it's really disingenuous for the fanbase to act like it is. Lingering Will showing up and then never being seen again is bizarre, but so is Pluto randomly disappearing in Traverse Town and never being seen or mentioned again until the ending. And so is Kairi wielding a Keyblade and never being seen with it again or even having it mentioned. And so is Roxas deciding to fight Sora for no explained reason other than fan service. At the end of the day, Kingdom Hearts 3 is another Kingdom Hearts game. So I don't really know what on earth you were expecting with the story. It's fine if you don't like it, but if you're gonna say that Kingdom Hearts 3's story is worse than prior Kingdom Hearts games just because it does the same things, it's a little, what's the word, hypocritical. This kind of criticism is what I'd expect from someone who's never played a Kingdom Hearts game before, but Kingdom Hearts fans, y'all should know better. One of the last things I want to touch on is the all too commonly seen criticism that Kingdom Hearts 3 is incomplete. Out of all the criticism combined, this is the one that I see the most, and I can't help but feel this comes from an extremely entitled mindset. People can't seem to differentiate between missed opportunities and something that genuinely feels incomplete. Kingdom Hearts 3 sets out to tell the story it wants to tell, and it tells it. There's never a point where the game feels like content was purposefully cut in order to sell it later as DLC, like Final Fantasy XV did. Now, I can understand where people might be coming from if there was a scene in Kingdom Hearts 3 in which Riku calls Sora on the gummy phone and says, "Hey, guess what? We just fought side by side with Leon and Cloud to defeat Sephiroth and an army of Heartless, and now I've got this cool scar out of it." But nothing even remotely of that nature ever happens. Everything that is important to know is seen through the player, and there's never a sense that something big happened in the story that the player missed out on. This isn't like Final Fantasy XV where Gladio decides to randomly leave the party for some mysterious reason, comes back and has a scar, and when everyone asks what happened, he's just like, "Yeah, no, it was a cool adventure, bro. Buy my DLC." And as far as post-game content goes, a lot of people are comparing Kingdom Hearts 3 to Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, and there's a few reasons why I think that's a ridiculously unfair comparison. For one, Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix has more meaningful post-game content than just about every PlayStation 2 video game that ever existed. And I'd argue that it has far more than 80% of AAA games that have come out in the past decade. And no, I'm not counting repetitive side quests that mean the exact same thing. I'm talking about variety of content and engaging content. Kingdom Hearts 2 has more than what most companies ever achieve. That's an incredibly high standard for post-game content to match, and all of that was never even available outside of Japan until 2014. I think a lot of people have been so spoiled by Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix that they forget that this is not at all the standard for most Kingdom Hearts games, or even console games altogether. In fact, most people I talk to are often surprised when I tell them just how little was in vanilla Kingdom Hearts 2. It only had one secret boss, which was Sephiroth, and it had the Underworld Coliseum. And that is it. Oh yeah, that infamous Roxas boss fight? Yeah, there was no boss fight when Kingdom Hearts 2 first released. It was just a single cutscene. Vanilla Kingdom Hearts 2 didn't have limit form, critical mode, no data battles, no absent silhouettes, no lingering will, no Cavern of Remembrance, no Christmas Town music or Christmas Town outfits. It didn't even have dodge roll, for crying out loud. People say that Kingdom Hearts 3's launch was lacking, but imagine launching a Kingdom Hearts game and taking away the only effective means of dodging enemy attacks. In fact, people seem to be so obsessed with Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, they forget that when Kingdom Hearts 2 first released in 2006, it was met with just as much division and criticism as Kingdom Hearts 3 currently has. And as you'll see from a lot of these complaints, they're almost word for word the same kind of complaints that people have been giving Kingdom Hearts 3, with the game's difficulty being the most common correlation. And forgive me for my tangent here, but I want to talk a little bit about difficulty because I think it's something that a lot of people are not understanding, why it's actually kind of a difficult thing for game developers to get right. I've seen a lot of people act really rude towards the developers of Kingdom Hearts 3 and are acting as though they're dumb for not knowing how to make a game challenging enough. But challenge is really difficult to narrow down because everyone's skill level is different and you'll never really know how well the audience will perceive it until the game launches. I actually have personal experience with this because I actually made and released a Kingdom Hearts fan game back in 2009 using RPG Maker XP. I spent a couple of years working on the game and I designed the dungeons, puzzles, and enemies to be a bit of a challenge. When I was making the game, I myself found myself really disappointed because I felt that Kingdom Hearts 2 was way too easy, and I didn't want this game to be too easy. However, at the same time, I also didn't want the game to be too difficult. The problem is that the longer that I developed this game and test played it myself, the easier I found the game. So as I continue to test this game, I end up making slight tweaks in order to up the challenge. Then, when I finally finished the game and I uploaded it, and there were more people starting to play it, I found that the vast majority of them found the game to be way too challenging, and most of them got stuck on the first boss. And I always felt that the first boss was really easy. I thought it was a cakewalk. But that was because I had test played the game so much that I already had far more experience with it than the average player ever could have. The only solution to this sort of problem is to have dedicated players hired by the company to play through these games. But then the challenge comes with that is that you need to have a variety of players with differing experience, and what might seem just about right for one player will be too difficult for another, and vice versa. One might be more easy for another. And when you have a game as highly talked about as Kingdom Hearts 3, you don't want to hire anyone that got famous for playing video games because you don't want to risk potential leaks. And that's not even considering the fact that, as much as a lot of teenage and adult Kingdom Hearts fans don't like to admit it, a large portion of the target audience for Kingdom Hearts are children. The difficulty problem is a lot more complex than the typical "stupid developers make bad game design" takes that you see online. Do I think Kingdom Hearts 3 is a little too easy even on Proud Mode? Yes, absolutely. I actually very much agree with that sentiment. But do I think that Kingdom Hearts 3 is fun regardless? Absolutely. And I think that something like Critical Mode can certainly be added later on in order to spice things up now that the game has been released, and the developers can get a better idea for what might be making the game too easy for certain players. In that sense, it was probably the smart thing to make Critical Mode something that would be patched in later rather than having it available right off the gate. Because if it was available right off the gate, let's be real, it would probably still be too easy for people's tastes. But since they've held back on it, they have the chance to view the criticism and see what they could work on and figure out how they can more fairly address some of these critiques. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad move, considering that Kingdom Hearts 2 literally did the exact same thing. A lot of people don't seem to remember this, but look up forum posts back in 2006 and 2007 and 2008. You'll see that Kingdom Hearts 2 got a lot of criticism from the gaming public, and Final Mix was a direct answer to most of these complaints. People complained that Kingdom Hearts 2 is too easy. Final Mix added in Critical Mode and the ability to play the entire game at level 1. People complained about not having dodge roll and other Kingdom Hearts 1 abilities, so Final Mix added in limit form. But the point is that Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix released a year after its initial release to add all of that and address criticisms that were made. They were never planned content from the start. And let's be honest, most of us outside of Japan never even had the opportunity to play it until 2014. So the fact that everyone is acting as if this is the standard that Kingdom Hearts games need to already be at during initial launch, and that anything less makes it a bad game, is just really freaking silly to me. Some have tried justifying this mindset by saying, yeah, well, Kingdom Hearts 2 had 4 years of development while Kingdom Hearts 3 had 6 years of development, so at bare minimum it should have the same amount of extra stuff as Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. And I think this kind of statement immediately showcases complete ignorance in how game development even works. I don't necessarily blame anyone for not understanding this, but I do think it's really insulting to the developers because the implication you're given is that they were being lazy, which is evidently not true when looking at everything that the developers had to work with and just how well the final product turned out. Many of you have probably heard the typical "games are more expensive to make than they used to be" tagline, and even though that statement is often used to justify exploitative business practices like loot boxes, the statement by itself is not actually false. The amount of resources that go into making a modern AAA game are far, far greater than they were back in the PS2 days. As someone who has some experience with 3D character modeling, I can tell you that the difference between making a low polygon character model that fits within the PlayStation 2 specs and making a high polygon character model that matches today's standards is incredibly high. It's a huge difference. It's a lot quicker to make low polygon characters because a lot of the details within the model are actually handled by 2D textures that are meant to create the illusion of actual objects. And these kind of cheats were needed in order to create models that worked within the console specs, but they happened to kill two birds with one stone because they made creating resources a lot faster than modeling every single thing by hand. And Kingdom Hearts 2 had a big advantage over Kingdom Hearts 3 in that it could reuse and tweak the same assets that were already used in Kingdom Hearts 1. Donald and Goofy are the exact same character models and even contain most of the exact same animations. Same thing for other returning characters in returning Disney worlds. Sure, they had Halloween Town return with brand new areas, but the basic assets for all the character models, the animations, and even many of the textures of the areas can be reused and repurposed from Kingdom Hearts 1. With Agrabah, they didn't have to create any new character models at all for that world because it's all returning characters. They already had models for Aladdin, Abu, Jasmine, Genie, Jafar, Iago, and the Peddler, so most of the basic work was already done. And as for level design, the level design of Kingdom Hearts 2 is very basic, and most of the areas are glorified hallways where exploration is pretty much non-existent. So there wasn't nearly enough time dedicated to that as there was in a game like Kingdom Hearts 1 or even Kingdom Hearts 3. Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance similarly also had the same advantages that Kingdom Hearts 2 had due to being released on hardware in which these kind of graphics were the standard. The same models that were made from Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 can continue to be reused or slightly modified as needed. This is a luxury that Kingdom Hearts 3 did not have. There was no way that Osaka Team could repurpose or reuse any of the assets in the prior Kingdom Hearts games. Well, with one exception. I'm pretty sure that the statues of Terra, Cloud, and Auron are actually the original PS2 and PSP models that were repurposed as statues, which if that's true, that's actually a really clever way of doing it. But tricks like that obviously can't work for everything else. Just about everything had to be built from scratch. And sure, they could use the old assets as references for when they're recreating these assets, but they still had to build them from scratch altogether. You couldn't just copy and paste the model and then click a button that says make it look more detailed. That's not how it works. And with new character assets meant that they had to rig these models from scratch, and it is highly likely that they had to make every single animation from scratch. Then you have to factor in that the developers had to deal with a switch to a new game engine that they had to learn. Then there's the fact that each world had wildly different art styles, so you couldn't really use any NPC or area assets outside of the worlds that they come from. On top of that, the developers were really trying to push the boundaries of what they could get away with in modern consoles, which meant that a lot of constant adjusting had to be done with the levels, lighting, particles, and even models. Then there's the factor that they were trying to make each world far bigger than prior Kingdom Hearts games and really push exploration at the forefront. And to top it all off, they had to custom animate two different versions of the characters' lip animations, one that syncs to the Japanese dialogue and one that syncs to the English dialogue, all while trying to get both done in time in order to make the game as close to a worldwide release as possible, which has never been done before in a Kingdom Hearts game. With all this in mind, it makes perfect sense that Kingdom Hearts 3 took 6 years to make. Shoot, it's a miracle that it even had as much post-game content on the game's release as it did. You know what most modern AAA companies are doing? They're releasing bare-bone games that can be beat in 5 to 10 hours with loads of microtransactions and DLC, repetitive side quests that pretend to add variety, but really it's just the same reskinned quest over and over and over again, and story that is blatantly taken out so that it can be sold later as DLC after the game's launch. Kingdom Hearts 3 was a collaboration of the companies Square Enix and Disney, one of which released the DLC-filled Final Fantasy XV, and the other being content with how EA has handled the Star Wars license. In this age of modern AAA video games, why on earth is Kingdom Hearts 3 of all games the one that's getting called out as being incomplete? Would I have liked to see more extras in Kingdom Hearts 3? Well, sure, but there's nothing about the base game of Kingdom Hearts 3 that feels like it is lacking something important or integral as a game. There's minor disappointments that I have and a couple of things that I would consider to be missed opportunities, but I have felt that way in every Kingdom Hearts game, and this isn't something that translates to the game is incomplete. It just makes it another Kingdom Hearts game. Okay, if you managed to make it this far into the video, I want to thank you for sticking around and hearing me out, even if you don't agree. And please, don't misunderstand, I'm not trying to say that you can't critique Kingdom Hearts 3. There are a few gripes that I have with it as well. For example, I think that Phil, Dylan, and Alias being mutes is really jarring. I think attraction flow is handled poorly, although I disagree with most people's conclusions. I wish Yoko Shimomura did the final boss music instead of Takehiro Ishimoto. I think it was a missed opportunity for Scala ad Caelum to not be a fully explorable world. I don't think the game is perfect by any means. But there's a major difference between having minor gripes with the game and ignoring everything that the game does well and acting like the game killed your dog just because it didn't live up to unrealistic expectations. At the end of the day, it's just a Kingdom Hearts game. And I don't say that lightly. I've been a massive Kingdom Hearts fan since the first game released back in 2002. It's easily my favorite video game series of all time. But as a lifelong Kingdom Hearts fan, it's never been a perfect series. The majority of the flaws that people point out in Kingdom Hearts 3 have been in the series for well over a decade, and in most cases have been far worse in prior entries. If you've been a fan for as long as I have and you've stuck around for this long, I really don't get why you're so angry about this particular game. There's far more to love about this game than there is to hate, and there is certainly nothing that is worth angrily tweeting about on a daily basis. If you happen to make it this far in this video, I recommend that you guys give Kingdom Hearts 3 another playthrough and try to push out those preconceived notions of what you think a Kingdom Hearts game should be. Try to see the game for what it is and not for what it isn't, and see what you think. You might find that you appreciate it more. And if you do this and you find that your views have not changed, then I only ask that you do not seek to go on a crusade trying to convince everyone else that enjoyed the game a lot more than you did that they are somehow objectively wrong or are just blinded by rose-tinted glasses. Just kindly recognize that the game didn't meet your personal criteria and move on.